All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Apparently, we're talking about Trump, Cleopatra, and Homeland Security. I was a little cynical and I didn't know what shirt to wear, so I just did some swag from our sponsor, Real Fitness and Performance.
Yeah.
Check out their channel. It is our sister channel. No politics, just fitness.
All
Uh,
right, well, why don't we start off with what you wanted to talk about because it made me remember something that I hadn't brought up before, um, and it will actually tie into to what you're going to talk about.
okay, let me get the correct tab here. All right. Is that the right one? Yeah, here we go. All right. So, luckily, as we talked about, I think last time, there are groups out there that are spending money and legal resources to do all these FOIA requests that give us lovely information that our government is trying to hide from us, and the federal government specifically. But I'm pretty sure it's all over the place. And there's this one group, and I don't know how much I identify with them politically, but they're doing a lot of FOIA requests and good work in that direction.
Mhm.
That's America First Legal. All right. So they, I saw this article. They released the internal DHS documents revealing the government is funding training intended to target conservative Americans. Well, of course, this is going to be a slightly biased article, even though they do source themselves.
Mhm.
So I said, well, you know what? Let's look at the actual document. So here it is. There was this document, which is kind of an overview, and then here's the actual training material. So going through now, it does. Oh yeah, it had to be a FOIA request because it was closed to the press, so we're not supposed to know about this, but we can now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
whether they're on the right or the left, all of these watchdog type groups are valuable for their because it takes time and money and know-how to file a FOIA request, and then you're often going to have to follow it up because you're going to get stonewalled, even though you're not supposed to. And so then you're going to have to follow it up. So I like all of these watchdogs, whatever their politics, so long as they post the documents. If you're just going to write a story and say, this is what we found, no, show me. Because almost all of these watchdogs have some sort of bias. So show me the actual document so I can see for myself.
yeah, and it this has been this is I always question an article that cites documents
Mhm.
but doesn't link them.
Oh yeah.
That's my first red flag. So America First, this article, yes, again, if you go through their text versus what is in there, there is bias in there. But it's not too much because their bias is they're just likely to point out the bad things in here that affect their side of the aisle.
Yeah.
Uh, Bottom line up front, this memo provides an overview of the challenges to accurately draw distinction between domestic terrorism and other criminal behavior, characterization of the current domestic threat environment, and the necessary structure for discussing DHS efforts to combat terrorism aligned with the terminology drawn from the national preparedness goal with examples. So here they spell out what they're trying to do. The background of the threat assessment, they go through who makes up the threatening groups, and they actually I think it's in here where they do mention at some point in here they do make mention of black supremacist groups as well as white supremacist groups and Antifa and uh, but then after they do that, they go down to the most persistent lethal threat among domestic violence extremists are white supremacist extremists. Are They are the most persistent threat. So no sources, by the way. They say 2018, 2019, white supremacists conducted half of all lethal attacks, eight of the 16, and caused about
Yeah.
81% of deaths from these lethal attacks. Where's my citation there? Because I think I brought up one time before I'm going to check once you get talking about stuff if I still have it, because I think I saved it to my computer, where they were actually describing this as well, and they listed off what they called domestic terrorist attacks
Yeah,
from
that's
white
my first thought.
supremacists.
My first thought
And it
there.
included things like Kyle Rittenhouse, which to
Oh,
me is actually defamation, but you know.
yeah. So my first thought was, well, what are your definitions? You gave us definitions up there, but
Mhm.
what's your definition here? And then I saw the 8 of 16 and I said, um, that's what we call a small sample size.
It is a very small sample size.
So you're being incredibly selective, clearly.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we don't know what those are, what they're counting, because we could probably count this latest guy in Allen, because he definitely had some neo-Nazi tendencies and he killed a bunch of people. Okay, we can probably count that, even though there was no, I mean, for me to be a terrorist attack, it should actually be attacking policy or the government specifically, not just he has these beliefs and he killed people.
Yeah, let's make a distinction here. The manual transmission shooter in Nashville, that was a terrorist attack because it was purposefully targeting an ideological group because they belong to that ideological group and to strike fear into other members of that group. That is
Based on policy
definitionally
that
terror.
was just going through the system at the time. So
Uh-huh.
yes, that is like as clear cut an example as you can get, right? But again, just having someone who has these certain thoughts in their private life, and then they go out and on a radical killing spree, which included basically all types of people.
Mhm.
I mean, I wonder if the Santa Fe shooter is on here. He was a white, technically white kid. He was Greek, or the Sutherland Springs shooter. He was there for a family vendetta, but that could be counted on here.
Mhm.
You know, so we don't know what their definition is here, and it's very worrisome because they're using this to basically as evidence to put further regulation, Patriot Act type stuff on us, right? And also to put out rhetoric for citizen against citizen. I'm going to call it fuckery, but shenanigans. You
Mhm.
know, watch your neighbor. Oh, where did we see this before? And so we keep going on. We expect white supremacists to continue to target racial and religious minorities as well as other vulnerable communities. Other significant threat factors. Okay, here's where they bring it up. Black supremacist, sovereign citizen, whatever that is. I'm assuming some sort of
That
nationalist type.
Well, that's what I'm confused about because usually when I hear people talking about the sovereign citizen movement or whatever, they're anarchists. But then they say anarchists and anti-government violent extremists right after that. But that's what sovereign citizen was. Okay, whatever.
Yeah. But it's also what Antifa is. But keep in mind, the most persistent threat is this.
Mhm.
Although we just spent the summer of love
Mhm.
dealing with this. Uh, protest related violence. Oh, and I meant to have this up. So another thing I'll look for when you're talking is, did you see all those the Patriot Front people that were arrested on their way to a protest?
No.
Okay, I'll bring that up while you're talking. So yeah, just going through here. Uh, the part I wanted to get through. So they're defining a lot of terms and talking about what their new rights under this. First of all, we never voted on these rights. This is an internal, we talk about the deep state.
Mhm.
This is an internal group giving themselves rights to basically find any excuse to monitor us or control us. Especially with, and I'd like to include this in this talk before I forget, the ever expanding definition of white supremacy.
Yep.
Because remember, by the definition that is currently in the Webster Dictionary, we can't help but be white supremacists. So any crime we commit can be put in that label, especially if it involves a minority group, whether that's color or religion.
Well, we're about to confirm this here later when I start ranting about Cleopatra.
Yeah. I am not going to suffer through that. I have suffered through enough shows for us. This one's on you. All right, so here's a profile setup. So now we're getting down to identifying these people. This is why I included the Santa Fe shooter in my, is this an example? Because he was the first person I thought of when we get the profile of Jamie here. So this is a stock photo. They tell you, so that way you don't go looking for Jamie. This is Jamie. He grew up in a suburban climate with a diverse group of friends, but now, as he's moved into senior year of high school, he's not hanging out with the same friends anymore. He's gaming online. Remember Gamergate? So all these things go into it. He's gaming online late at night constantly, and his grades have tumbled. His parents got divorced sophomore year, and he doesn't talk to them anymore. After another disappointing report card, his mother noticed he is playing online war games more and more alone in his room and could overhear some of the mean and degrading language he and other players were using. This sounds like it was written by a graduate student in the social studies department that just read a bunch of things on Gamergate, that read a bunch of things on the Santa Fe shooter, that read all these really horrible, unreplicable studies on violent games and actual violence, which it may actually be the reverse. They're keeping people from being violent, but that's another discussion. All of these, it just sounds like someone who just read all of that stupid crap and then wrote a profile based on it. And of course, he's a little white kid. And so now they give you scenarios. So, and by the way, they are based on these scenarios, they're profiling you as an agent. So you're in a locker room at school, and your teammate Jamie, a white freshman, gets bumped by Asif, an ethnic minority teammate, or Asif, or however you want to pronounce it. I don't want to mispronounce a name because that is apparently a microaggression.
Yeah.
They have angry words in front of you and their other teammates, and Jamie ends up shoving Asif into a locker. Teammate bystander choices. Talk to the coach about Jamie's change in behavior. Ask Jamie about his aggressive behavior towards minorities. So confront him, or just walk away. Well, with their assessment of your choice, I would like you to notice a pattern here. Narrative. By the talking to the coach, you could be helping, but you can't always know what the results of your action could be. After the locker room incident, tensions amongst the team continue to escalate next week at practice. So not the right choice. Narrative. Narrative 2. Approaching Jamie directly might reveal important insights into his behavior change. After the locker room incident, tensions amongst the team continue to escalate next week at practice. So also not the right answer. Narrative 3, by walking away, you've just made an active decision not to help Asif and also allow Jamie to engage in aggressive behavior. This choice could lead to further incidents with Jamie feeling empowered and Asif feeling isolated and threatened. After the locker room incident, tensions amongst team continue to escalate next week at practice. There was no right answer. Every single one of them ended with tensions increase and next week at practice, ...
I especially like the last one there because this is the Department of Homeland Security codifying the nonsensical idea that silence is violence.
Well, not only that, it's the right thing to do to snitch. Because the first one, even though it was still not the right answer, was the best of the three by the result. You could be helping. So it at least gave you the could, right?
Yeah.
So there was no right answer. And then they give another example where you're, I think, a mother, and same thing happens. Jamie and Asif get into something, and now you as a parent can talk to the coach, call Jamie's parents, or contact the school counselor. And they were none of them the right answer. So, and realistically, when we're talking about these shooters, we've ranted about it. This happened a lot. And they did nothing anyways. The FBI themselves did nothing.
Well, that was going to be my other comment when we got to the end of this is all of this attention here on this kind of incident, and how many times has there been a mass shooter and we find out later, usually not that long later, that they were on somebody's radar. They were on a federal agency's radar, whether it was the FBI or Homeland Security or somebody. They had come to their attention before, and the agency did nothing.
The Parkland shooting, that is there were people actually fired and sued because the parents actually kept pushing that envelope. The Uvalde guy, we found out later, his grandmother was trying to help him by getting him in front of the right people the whole time, and that's probably why he killed her first.
Shot her first. I don't think she died, did she? Did she?
I don't know if she died,
Because I
but
believe she was the one
he
who
did shoot her
initially
though.
called
Yeah.
911.
But the Santa Fe shooter, he had a history of basically talking about doing this to his counselors, which one thing your counselor can say is if you were planning to harm somebody or yourself.
Yeah.
That's the one thing they can breach your confidentiality with.
Yes.
And nothing was done, or unless they did, and still nothing was done.
And it's still the one that jumps out at me the most, and I brought it up before, is the Orlando gay nightclub shooting, because it's so illustrative of how the narrative works. Because the initial reports did not report anything about the shooter, just about the victims. So the immediate narrative was this must have been some radical Christian, some conservative bigot targeting homosexuals. Oh, turns out he was a Muslim who had become radicalized and decided as an independent terrorist, basically. So that was why he did it. And then, never mind. The narrative goes away because, you know, the facts no longer fit. And then further down the road, like a week later, we find out, and the FBI had been notified about this guy. The FBI had looked into this guy before and did nothing.
Okay, so now the third one is you're Jamie's girlfriend. He's being abusive, and here are your choices. Ask him what's behind the need to have a gun. Oh yeah, he goes and gets a gun, flashes the gun. What's behind the need to get a gun? Ask mutual long-term friend if he's noticed any behavior changes, or call authorities and share your concerns. Calling the authorities would be appropriate if you're aware he has a gun that is not bought legal. In any event, they may have advice about how to address your concerns. So they actually give a right answer there. But at the same time, still, this is your profile. These are the scenarios. This is how you identify a domestic terrorist. Let's look at another profile.
Well, hold on a second. Scroll back up. No. Hold on a second. Contacting the authorities would be appropriate if you're aware he has a gun that was not bought legally. This is a law enforcement agency. Just carrying a handgun is illegal for a minor. They don't seem to know that. In no state that I know of can a minor, not just a minor, under 21, have a handgun. Now, you can purchase a long arm, depending on the state, if you are younger. That was a big deal in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. You can have a long arm, a rifle or a shotgun, sure, but of course you can't carry it unless it's an open carry state. And even if it's open carry, I don't think minors can open carry. So the whole premise of this is a high schooler. He just flashed you a gun. You go to the authorities and say, this person who is one, a minor, and two, acting irrationally is carrying a gun.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about, let's be specific here. This is a document on identifying domestic terrorists. Young, dumb boys do stupid shit all the time for all reasons other than I want to overthrow my government.
That was the other thing that I wanted to bring up about this scenario in particular. Keep in mind, go back to the beginning here, right there. This whole scenario of white supremacist violence, this specific scenario, is predicated on the fact that he got into a beef with someone who's an ethnic minority.
Especially a beef that was started by the other person.
Accidentally or not, yes.
Accidentally or not, yeah. Again, be around young boys long enough. A bump in a shoulder is enough to start angry words.
I've got to puff up my chest now.
Yeah, so the monkey dance. It's called the monkey dance in psychological literature.
So a white boy shoves a ethnic boy. Ipso facto, he's a white supremacist. It's mind-boggling. It would be hilarious if it wasn't so terrifying. Yeah. Because again, this is one of the most powerful agencies in the administrative state.
see. Then we've got the anti-government authority abusive parent stepdad.
Oh no.
Oh no. Again, stock photo, so don't go looking for heat here. But mid-30s white dude, basically, is profile. Oh, good thing we're in our 40s now. You're Pete's friend, sitting in front of a computer looking at Pete's social media posts. You've been friends online for a couple years, and Pete has always seemed like a decent guy. But recently, you've noticed changes in his behavior online that alarm you. You've even seen him post on some radical sites with violent tendencies. Again, this is very not specific, because what have been being called radical sites. Didn't they try to blame Tim Pool for this last shooter? Yeah. So if you go to timcast.com, is that a radical site? If you retweet something he said, is that being radical? According to Homeland Security, yes. So
Hey, remember that time CNN outed some rando online simply because he made a meme, a pro-Trump meme?
I think he was actually just on Timcast, because there was a meme guy
Really?
that is hated by everybody that was just on there. It might be the same guy. That sounds familiar. I didn't watch the whole episode though. Okay, so then they give you these three choices, and again, they don't give you the breakdown. I guess they got lazy here. There's no breakdown of what the different choices mean. But then you get different situations where well, this one's relevant. The bar. You're a bartender, and Pete is a regular patron at your bar, but tonight he's come in with a group of strangers. You've never seen him be violent, but as you serve drinks to him, you notice his new group of friends talking about their plans to head to a political rally. Then you overhear them talking about messing with counter protesters. That brings us to this. Now, I'm not going to argue about them being white nationalists, because I don't know enough about Patriot Front
I
to know.
just heard about this group yesterday, the day before, and I said, who? What?
Yeah. So I'm not going to comment on that. But again, it doesn't matter what their political opinions are. They have a right to protest. And they were
You have a right to protest. I have a right to counter protest.
Yep, they were going to counter protest, and they were intercepted along the way and arrested for conspiracy to riot. There was no crime committed.
This is future crime stuff. This is, yeah.
This is, we think you're going to do something bad, so we're going to go ahead and arrest you because of your political beliefs. These are political prisoners. Now, it did ended up being a misdemeanor, but still, that can mess with you on your record. And because
I love this too. They did this thing with Rittenhouse too. He crossed state lines. Last I checked, it was a free frickin' country. Well, clearly not anymore, but so
here's, if we were a normal functioning society, even if you got information that they were planning on doing some things, because there were modalities that they could have used to hurt somebody, that they had I think some smoke bombs or something. If you had that information, you can just have your riot control ready. You don't arrest anybody until they have done something illegal. You're just guessing. This reminds me of freaking Robin Hood Men in Tights, blinking up on the top of the tower.
Lincoln,
what are you doing up there? I'm guessing. I guess they're going to riot, so let's arrest them. That's not how this is done.
Yeah.
You could put a watch on that. You could make sure there's a police force present, like we could have done on January 6th, but you can make sure these things are present so nothing bad can happen. But I mean, go back to the Summer of Love. Why didn't we do this to every group of people heading to downtown Portland? It's the same damn thing. Conspiracy to riot. We don't know they're going to riot till they actually do. But yeah, so now back to our scenario in the bar, messing with counter protesters. Well, that could be anything from actually doing something harmful or just telling jokes and having, meme like posters to make fun of the people who are protesting, which is completely legal. So do you pull them aside? Do you call Pete's old drinking buddy? So now we're neighbor on neighbor again. Ask the other bartenders and your manager if they've noticed any changes in behavior. This is all ridiculous. This is basically identify your neighbor as the bad guy. Now they did put in one that's in the not as persistent group here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, stock photo, young black girl who's a animal rights and environmental advocate, but they kind of made it benign, the stuff she's going to do. And then we get to your next one. There's plenty of these. Oh, your middle-aged pro-life advocate. There's your domestic terrorist right there. Mid-40s woman. Anne. Bystanders, the people she could hurt, preacher, bakery employee. Where did that come from? I wonder why bakery employees in there. So this is just all to hammer home. This is what we're calling signs of domestic terrorism. So when we have a situation like this, how many of these people were profiled in this way?
Mm-hmm.
So now we have them on a list, and here's the date. So this is not new. It's new to us because of the FOIA request.
Yeah.
This is not new. How many of these people would have fit one of these profiles? Your 30s soccer dad, your mid 40s pro-life mom. This is the regime we're under now, guys.
Paraphrase, it was Franklin who, after the Constitutional Convention was asked, "What kind of country have you made for us?" "A banana republic, madam, if you can keep it." I mean, this is full banana republic stuff. One of the hallmarks of third world banana republic, chaos is you use the tools of politics, you use the rule of law not for justice, but to punish your political opponents. That is why so often in, Africa, South America, after an election, there is massive violence because there is a great deal of fear that they're going to do what you probably did last time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's violence. Now, what this made me think of when you brought this up was, hey, remember one of the places where the red wave actually happened was Virginia, in large part because of school board shenanigans. And there were some viral videos from Loudoun County was the big one because there were several incidences in Loudoun County. One in particular where this poor guy was getting irate at a school board meeting and they had him tackled and arrested. And that police officer should be sued and fired because that's not your job. You are not the private security of the school board.
Mm-hmm.
Why was he? Well, you find out later the reason he was irate is because the school, without letting anybody know, was letting a guy who felt pretty and wore a dress use the girls' bathroom. While he was in there, he raped this guy's daughter. Again, the school board didn't tell anybody about this. They just transferred him out of the district. He then did it again in another school district. This is what this father was irate about. Shortly thereafter, there was a big blow up where the National School Board Association, and there's some controversy about, did the School Board Association ask the Department of Justice, or did the Department of Justice instigate this of looking into domestic terrorists, labeling people who go to school boards and get upset and yell at the school board members, labeling them domestic terrorists. The plot thickens. Let me share this one. All right. AG Merrick Garland, son-in-law's education company supports critical race theory. So, more than just supports, Merrick Garland's son-in-law is part of a company that supports critical race theory curricula while servicing 23,000 schools in the nation, costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars, while Garland cracks down on opposition to the ideology.
See, that's why I
Oh,
thought this was going to segue really well with Cleopatra.
isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So this guy is making tons of money selling critical race theory, uh, diversity inclusion mumbo jumbo, which is part of what these parents were so upset about once they started to figure out how pervasive, not only pervasive it was, but what's the word I'm looking for? Subversive this ideology is to young minds. And rather than saying, "Oh, we represent the parents, we serve the parents," they called the cops, they called the feds. And it just so happens that the guy in charge of the Department of Justice of investigating, coercing, uh, uh, intimidating these parents has a financial stake in it.
Mm-hmm.
Curious, isn't it?
Curious. Now, be careful out there, everyone, because remember, you're being labeled something that is becoming codified into law, even though under the surface, and the reaction determines your guilt.
Mhm.
So, why is Cleopatra so bad? Because they don't care. They just want you to react to it. This is activism. This is not trying to make good cinema. The worse it is, the better.
Where is it? Here we go. All right, so that I'm gonna jump ahead to, since we've segued into Cleopatra. I had some other stuff I was going to talk about first. I'll back up and we'll look at some other stuff first. But here is
Well, we'll just
this.
make it all one big part of the
Yeah.
segment. Yeah.
All right. So what you just said fits perfectly with this. This is from a Washington Post article, and they mention a guest column in Variety that the show's director, Tina Garavi, said her research on the Hellenistic era queen, who she writes was 8 generations away from her Ptolemaic ancestors. Okay, whatever. Led her to realize, quote, direct quote from the director, what a political act it would be to see Cleopatra portrayed by a black actress.
Mm-hmm.
We're crazy people, we're conspiracy theorists, even when we just cite what they say directly.
Mm-hmm.
This was a political act. This had nothing to do with portraying history.
Yeah. Well, and you just look at the pattern. Oh, you like Ariel from Disney?
Mhm.
Let's change her. Oh, you like Peter Pan? Oh, let's make him a simp and change the whole story. Oh, you like this? You like watching football? Guess what? You like watching football. You're going to have to watch this too.
Mhm.
It is the whole plan. See, this is actually evidence in and of itself that that document that said white supremacist domestic terrorists are the biggest problem, pervasive problem in the country, because where have they been through all of this? They're poking that bear, trying to get it to do something.
Mhm.
And for some reason, other than a very few little outbursts here and there by individuals who were also crazy, not some pretty conscientious person that just has bad views, but actually crazy, clinically crazy, there hasn't been an uprising. There's been a few protests here and there. There's been a few rallies here and there, but there has not been a violent uprising, despite the fact that for the last 10, 15 years, every entity that has any power to do so, the media, the Hollywood, the government itself, has been poking that bear to try to get it to do something. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that cool heads have actually held, except for, again, a couple instances like Charleston. Yeah, that person was bad, but he was an individual that actually messed it up for everybody else. This guy in Allen, yeah, he was a crazy individual that just happened to have these other certain beliefs.
And we still don't know all the details because some of the stuff that came out about his social media is a little bit suspect. So it's
Yeah,
not
but that's
clear.
another one where even the counters to it, the mugshots and stuff released by the conservative side actually were incorrect too. So this is one reason we try not to jump on these things so quickly, because yeah, if I had seen the mugshot shown by, I don't know, like just some conservative media, and then next to the actual pictures of the social media that was on this weird Russian site,
Yeah.
yeah, that's obviously a different person. But it turns out, oh, you see the actual mugshot of the person? Well, that is him. So it's, well, mugshot. There's posthumous mugshot. They don't mugshot someone who died, but
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what is especially hilarious to me about the Cleopatra thing is now you've read the the CRT people in their own words. You've read their
mhm.
documents. And one of the things that they talk about and has been talked about for a while is decolonizing history. Well, that's exactly what the makers of this Cleopatra so-called documentary are doing, are they not? They're
Mhm.
colonizing Egyptian history to fit there, in their director's own words, to make a political act, to fit in with American racial perspectives and racial politics.
So hopefully the people who wrote this and wants to celebrate Black leaders in Africa. Here's the U.S. Census ethnic breakdowns. Uh, if you're white, I would like to put this as Exhibit A. This person, if you are applying for anything that has any affirmative action
Mhm.
category to it, nobody from this certain country can be called anything but white. But you want to put it on the screen and see how virtuous you are. Oh my gosh, they're in Africa. They must be Black. That's what cracked me up when I was filling out the census. You can be not from Africa and be considered Black, African American, but you could also be from Africa and be considered white. So they want their
And
cake and eat it too. That's the whole thing is pissing you off. That's the point. We're gonna
yes.
piss everybody off. We're gonna take away everything they like until they bubble up and they react to it, and then that's proof that we have this bad thing.
Yep. It, but it's especially absurd with this, and I hope that this is going to be a great example of overreach and let more people wake up and more people actually stand up and do something about it, because you're labeling Egyptians racist for pointing out that you're distorting our history. There is a cultural and ethnic difference between North Africans and Sub-Saharan Africans. Duh, because there's this gigantic no man's land that separates them. That's why their cultures are so distinct.
Well, let's go back to
And
the first part of the conversation so we can kind of put this tapestry together. And how many times does this happen before they actually react? I don't know enough about Patriot Front to know what they're capable of. But how many times does this happen to their group before someone in the group does something on their behalf? Because you've been oppressing us, government, we're going to do something. How many times? How many of those, again, poke, bear, poke, bear, poke, bear. Look, bear is violent. Grab dog by the ears, grab dog by the ears, grab dog by the ears, bite. Look, that breed of dog is violent. That's
Yeah.
exactly the point right now, because then once that reaction happens, the government can say, see, we need this act to monitor these organizations even harder. Govern me harder, daddy. You
Well,
know?
it's what we talked about, and others have done deep dives on this and actually gone into the text of it. But the supposed anti-TikTok campaign that sprung out of nowhere when TikTok's been around, when Chinese apps and Chinese spying has been around for decades, but oh, now we finally care. And it's just a coincidence that this bill would give way more power to the government and to uh, Alphabet, Google, YouTube, Facebook, the big
Mhm.
players in America. It's just a coincidence.
Well, even on the social scale, the cultural scale, toxic masculinity, toxic masculinity, toxic masculinity. How long did that go before an Andrew Tate comes up?
Mm.
There's a reason the phenomenon exists, because men are desperate to actually be men. And this is a Hitler effect. He's a cultural Hitler in the fact that he came in and filled the void in a bad way.
Well, first before that, I've got to
Well, I tried to
um
circle it kind of back because you said you had more thoughts on the other things, so figured that would give you a.
this is just to have a little amusement here. This is amusing to me that uh this Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra. And this has been panned, especially recently in recent history, because, oh, you have Elizabeth Taylor playing this Egyptian queen. Well, it turns out that's way more accurate than what Netflix is doing. Yes, John Wayne playing Genghis Khan is absurd,
Mhm.
and we should rightly mock that. But she was part of a Ptolemaic dynasty. Royals tended to have insular bloodlines. That's why we make fun of them, the Brits, for being inbred, because you tended to have insular bloodlines, and the ruling elite after the fall of after Alexander's death were Ptolemaic Greeks. That's one of the reasons they're ticked off. It's not she was light singed, and you can find other people bringing up numerous examples of mosaics, sculptures, coins, all of them bearing a similar likeness and all of them claiming to be Cleopatra, and she has definitive Greek features. Anyway, that matters to the Egyptians because, again, this is our history. This is our heritage. This is part of where we came from that made us who we are today. And you're destroying and distorting that. And this cheesy movie that's been panned recently is at 56% by the critics and 68% on the audience score. And here you have this Yahoo News story.
Oh, it
Uh,
went up a percent since
it went up a whole
Drinker did
percent,
his thing. Yeah.
but amusingly, it went down a percent on the professional side. So it's at 10% from the critics and 2% now from the audience. And it's, oh, why is this happening? And it's not wildly low, it's hot garbage. That's why this is happening. And it's not just the, the blackwashing that is happening, but um it is the absurdity of the so-called history in it. Um, so this got me. Um, the scenes are interspersed with commentary from experts such as Shelley Haley, a retired professor of classics and Africana studies and consultant on the series, and Deborah Hurd, a PhD candidate, and they're calling her an expert in Nubian archaeology. That jumped out to me if you don't know what that is. So if you can envision the Nile River in your head, and you have
Mhm.
Egypt up here, what's called the lower Nile because it's lower down the flow, and then the upper Nile uh, more into the Sahara, into the mountains, and that group there in what is now mostly Sudan was called Nubia. And that is where the Black Africans come from. That is where they uh, interacted with Egyptian society. She should know there's a stark difference there. In fact, there was a lot of tension there. It's one of the reasons there continues to be a little tension, racial tension among Black Africans and Egyptians, is because this goes back millennia, and the conflicts that occurred kind of there at that border between the upper and lower Nile. So she knows better. She absolutely knows better. But that doesn't matter because, as the director said, it's a political act. The series details undisputed facts about Cleopatra, including the Macedonian Greek descent of her father's line, and that Greek was her first language, but it also makes clear there are things we don't definitively know about her, including the identity of her mother, and whether her dalliances with Caesar, the father of her firstborn son, were romantic, strategic, or both, or even if that firstborn son was Julius Caesar's. No, but we can make some educated guesses. But the one that gets me, I think if you watch Drinkers, I think he played this clip. In the first few minutes of the series, Haley recalls her grandmother telling her, "I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black." Critics globbed on to the snippet after it appeared in the trailer, but ultimately, Haley says in the series, we don't know her exact racial heritage, but you think you know enough to make her what you did rather than what all the coins and mosaics look like, rather than what most people assume based on the history of the time. These people know better, but here's one of the reasons that jumped out at me is because it made me think of one of the more ridiculous and insidious racial debates, shall we say, of Jesus was black. Okay, well, no, he wasn't.
He was Jewish.
If you look at the people who have lived in that area for centuries, you can get a good idea. In Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, you can get a rough idea of what the people of that era probably looked like. But why is it important to some people that Jesus was black? Because he's ours, not yours. Because it makes us special. It makes us better. It is a form of racial superiority. Using a figure who was who was known for being open and welcoming and inclusive to all if you simply followed his religious precepts. It didn't matter. Very famously, he was with the sinners. Very famously, I came to heal the sick, not the well. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, man or woman anymore. Those are some of the most radical tenets of theology and philosophy ever. I mean, those don't really come into their own until the modern era.
There is that, and we'll give the good actors that still that are misled that thought. But let's be real. The people who are pushing that are maneuvering here are not the good actors. The people who are putting that thought and using that feeling to spread the meme are the bad actors. And the truth is not because it makes us superior and it makes us feel better about ourselves. It's because it pisses you off. I'm telling you, this is the theme. This is there are books written on this up here. This is exactly how this works. We piss you off so you do bad things, so we're justified in our actions. And that's the truth. Why Black Jesus? Well, because most Christians are white. So why kneel for the national anthem? Because most people think that's shitty in this country. Mm-hmm. Why Black Cleopatra? Because you can't do anything about it except be mad.
And why does it matter to me so much? And where I wanted to take this conversation was why we talk about the things we talk about and why we talk about them the way we talk about them. because it's not just that this is absurd. It's not just that they're doing this, as they say, as a political act, which to your point means let's make people angry and create schism and animosity and you know political excitement on our side and political excitement on their side so that we get a clash. It's not just that. It's see, to me, this ties into what we were arguing about a few weeks ago, which is the destruction of objectivity. 2 + 2 = whatever you want it to equal. So it's uh so there's this horrible show on Netflix that called Bridgerton, but that has a silly multi-ethnic cast, but it's fiction. It's historical fiction. It's portraying the Victorian era in a way that isn't remotely accurate, but it's not pretending to be history.
Mhm.
This is pretending to be history. This is saying uh history can be whatever you want it to be. No, it can't. The so after we argued, I watched uh Dr. Peterson interviewing who was that doctor? Um Dang it, I forgot her name. That she had written a book and she had another one coming out about the trans mania, and they went into where it came from with Dr. Money and what a
Mm. Oh
grotesque
yeah, I know
human
which one you're
being he
talking about.
was.
I can't quote her name though.
Well,
Uh,
Jordan made an offhand comment that I wish they would have both spent more time on, which is that there may not be anything more foundational earlier in your development than man and woman, male and female, brother and sister, mom and dad. That as Peterson put it, that's as foundational as up and down. And now we've just destroyed it. There is no up, there is no down, there is no man, there is no woman, there is no history. That's dangerous because if there is no objectivity, then we can do whatever we want.
mhm. And guess who's going to swoop in to take advantage? The federal government. Because it's going to be unruly when you can do whatever you want. And ultimately, that dam breaks. Ultimately, it breaks and there's disorder, and something has to come in and create the order. And the thing that comes in and create the order under that situation is not going to be the benevolent thing. It's going to be the thing that's been waiting for it. Again, we've seen this before. Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot.
Well, we've seen it before here too. You go back to World War I, and there were something like 6,000. There's nothing else to call them but political prisoners. There was I can't. I'm brain farting on the name of the law, or they may have been using the Alien and Sedition Act. Anyway, under pretenses of some clearly unconstitutional laws, the Woodrow Wilson administration locked up about 6,000 people simply for disagreeing with our entry into World War I, for speaking up against our entry into World War I, and they were locked up. There's nothing to call that but political prisoners. We've done it here. When we get whipped up into
Conspiracy
a
to
mob,
riot.
conspiracy to riot. When we get whipped up into a mob, we have done some pretty damn horrible things as Americans. That was another thing I meant to bring up because of a guy I've started watching relatively recently called Echo Chamberlain. He brought this up. He kind of stole my thunder when he was talking about why this matters. And it's so there's a term called historiography that historians use amongst themselves in nerdy academic circles. Basically, what that means is the consensus, the agreed upon narrative. So we'll argue about the details. You know, uh crap, I just brain farted on the name of the place. The battle where Alexander defeated the Persians. Galma something or other.
Mm.
Okay, so it's pretty well agreed that happened, and it probably happened about this time, and it probably happened about this way. But we can disagree and we can be uncertain about the numbers, the particular tactics that were used. Did this really happen? Did that really happen? But the big picture is agreed upon. That's historiography. That's something that Cleopatra is destroying. We have known certain things, and and we're just throwing that out the window. And one of the a contrast he used was the massacre that happened in Tulsa in, I want to say 1923, but I probably should look that up to be sure. When what was called Black Wall Street was burned down by a just an insane evil mob of white people that just went in
1921.
21. They just went in and they destroyed something like 30 city blocks. It was a huge area. Was just, you look at pictures of it and it looks like pictures I saw in Ypres, Belgium of World War I, where you just have, you know, parts of buildings still standing and it's just flat all around. That has been rightly criticized because what we did was we just ignored it and we forgot it. And it is very rarely taught in history courses where it probably should be taught. But we we didn't make it up. I mean, it's bad enough that we just ignored it, but at least we didn't make crap up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the analogy I thought of when I was thinking about this to kind of illustrate how terrible what these people are doing, no matter what they think their intentions are, it would be like this. Well, I'm going to make a docudrama about the burning of Black Wall Street, but we need to reimagine it for modern times. And we have to hashtag stop Asian hate, don't you know? So I'm going to make it a community of Chinese immigrants. Would that be okay? I mean, I'm still telling the same basic story about an ethnic minority that was targeted. Something like 300 people were killed, all of this destruction of property, and then the people never got justice. There was no compensation. The perpetrators just disappeared into the mist. I'm still telling the same basic story, so that'd be okay, right? If I changed that black neighborhood to Chinese immigrants so we can hashtag stop Asian hate.
No, it's not okay because Chinese are white adjacent.
Oh, okay. My bad.
You're back. No, you can replace like Hispanic with Chinese because that's probably on equal level. Or no. I think Hispanic is considered more oppressed. So,
well, right now we would have to make it like turn it into the South San Francisco. Let's do that. Let's make them all LGBTQ.
Yeah, that actually would work. Yeah,
yeah, I think that'll be okay. We'll do that.
Well, I can point out a show that kind of did it well. The Monster Dahmer story. Have you seen the advertisements for that?
No.
Monster is they're going to go through different serial killers or whatever. I think the next one are the Menendez brothers, which I think is kind of a boring story. So I don't know why they picked them, but when there's so many good ones to choose from. But the first one was Jeffrey Dahmer. And realistically, it's true that the reason he was able to fly under the radar for so long was because there was this non-response in poor black gay neighborhoods, which was his primary victim. It was a gay man, but it was typically a black gay man because of adjacent, because that's where he lived. And they threw in that message there, but it's actually true. And I would extend that to poor because I grew up in the trailer parks and stuff. It's the poor areas anyways that get that kind of cop interaction where they're like, yeah, I don't really want to be here, so I'll take your statement and I'm getting out.
And we're done now.
Yeah,
Dave Landau, if you like dark humor, Dave Landau has a hilarious bit on this of, these poor Midwestern cops, they don't want to deal with this. Oh, it's just gay stuff. They're weird. It's like, why is there blood all over that? Oh, gay people.
Well, yeah, there was one victim that he was trying to get away after Dahmer had drilled a hole in his head. Uh, and the cops took him back to Dahmer's office because it was just boyfriend stuff. He was just drunk and it was boyfriend stuff. We didn't want to get involved.
Mhm.
Well, the guy ended up being supper later. It's yeah, this kind of stuff went on because of the prejudice. And that is actually the correct message you can do properly so we can look at history, the Dahmer story, it's history, and not do the same damn thing again, which it still happens in poor neighborhoods, right? These cops don't want to be there. And now you add defund the police to it, they're being, judged for even doing their job in these areas. They really don't want to be there. But yeah, that's an example of how it went well. Now there were some people mad about that show, but apparently I kind of dug into it. It's because they weren't getting paid. The families of the victims that they were mad. It would be okay to have the show if it's like reliving the events all over again. You could at least pay us. Was the next words out of them like,
Oh my gosh, I
um,
finally watched the Peterson's interview with Riley Gaines, and
oh
the
yeah,
the mob telling the dean that we'll leave, but she has to pay us.
$10 a piece.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's the world we live. Those are the kind of people that look at that story you posted about the Patriot Front and said, "Well, yeah, of course."
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and in that interview, he was absolutely correct when he said they could do nothing when you were kidnapped. You were kidnapped and held against your will.
Hmm.
At the end of the day by the mob,
Hmm.
and nobody was willing to do anything. I have the wrong Murray book up there. I should have had Madness of Crowds, but
Well, that one's good too because um one of the hallmarks of what makes Western civilization is supposed to be, and this was a major component of the Renaissance and the political ideas that came from there, the rule of law. Well, what does the rule of law mean? The rule of law doesn't mean you have laws. Anybody can have laws. The Code of Hammurabi is touted as, this great early codification of law. Yeah, and then you go and read it, and it's the death penalty for everything. Oh, you accidentally, looked at the Empress, dead. You hunted in the king's forest, dead. It's not that you have laws, it is that the laws treat everyone equally. We don't have that at all
mm-mm.
right now. And an
Yeah, and
example
the
of that,
truth that it was the other way around, unequal in another direction, does not justify having it the way it is now. We should be striving towards nobody's perfect, but we should be striving towards perfection. And perfection is not flipping it. That's just being wrong in the other direction.
go way back when I brought up the uh, Inspector General's report and what was being talked about the Durham report that is now out
Oof, oof.
this
That
week.
that's a whole episode on itself.
So
I need time to read into it though.
if you want a Cliff's Notes version,
I've gotten a
go
few Cliff Notes versions, but
go listen to Dan Bongino's podcast from yesterday or the day before, where not only does he go into it, but then he brings the receipts, including things I didn't know when we talked about it way back when. Remember, one of the things I brought up, because this was the most ridiculous part of the story to me, is that one of the targets of this FBI probe when they were trying to get Trump was a guy named George Papadopoulos. He was a young guy who was fairly inexperienced. He was kind of new to this world. Um, and they were able to nab him on technicality, basically. And he goes into that too, and it's even more ridiculous than I thought, the way the FBI treated him. But one of the really egregious things about that was that um, the FBI knew that because they had asked that Papadopoulos was a CIA source. that, yeah, he would go and he would talk to these foreign businessmen and foreign uh, politicians and administrators and whatnot, and then he would brief us on what they talked about. So you're saying you're telling the FISA court that this guy is meeting with or talking about meeting with shady people, so we have to investigate him. You already know that he's one of the good guys. Not only is he one of the good guys, he is a source for the CIA. It gets worse than that, though. So one of the things that was the evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign was that one of these conversations of Papadopoulos was with an Australian member of the embassy, I believe. I don't think he was an ambassador, the ambassador. He was an ambassador, member of the Australian embassy. He supposedly had a conversation with this guy that claiming that he knew, that they knew, the Trump campaign knew that Russia had dirt on Hillary and was going to release it leading up to the election. So that was evidence that we need to investigate them for colluding with Russia. Bongino played a clip of that guy, that Australian, from 2019 saying that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
That conversation never took place. The reason I bring that up is because, again, if there is no objectivity, if nothing matters, then you can just do whatever you want. And I brought up back then, the reason this matters, even though I don't like Trump and I don't want him to be the nominee, is if they can do this to the president of the United States, who is independently wealthy to boot, what can they do to you? And you just brought it up with the Patriot Front of, oh, well, we think they're going to do something, so we're going to arrest these 31 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're on a list. I mean, let's be real. All our stuff's on YouTube. We're probably on a list. I just got a notification from Glenn Lowry because I'm a subscriber on his thing. It's apparently he had a video deleted for hate speech.
So these people were arrested for conspiracy to instigate a riot. What about all the
conspiracy
FBI
to riot? You're saying they're going to do the thing.
What about the conspiracy that we know for a fact because we have the text messages and the emails and the calendars of meetings that took place? And again, we can go down the rabbit hole now that the Durham report is out and there's even more detail. We know for a fact there was conspiracy. There were, if laws were not broken here, then what is the point of the law? At the least, they should be held civilly liable for violating Trump's civil rights.
So let's put this in
no one's being held accountable.
A slightly cartoony, but it actually is relevant way. Oh, my wife's been pissing me off lately. I just want to
to the moon.
Cops show up. Conspiracy to commit murder. You said these words. You're capable of doing it because you're bigger and stronger than she is. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's like what, 20 years? I mean, if we're going to talk about conspiracy to do this just because you're capable of doing it, I mean, the sky's the limit. Political prisoners for whatever, you know?
And I mean, it's not new. We're just going farther and farther down the rabbit hole. We talked about the conspiracy to abduct Governor Whitmer, and more than half the members were FBI agents or informants.
Well, and as the trial went on, this is the part that you're not seeing in the mainstream media is the people who weren't the informants were trying to stop it. They were like, no, you're going too far. Maybe like some graffiti or something, that'd be fun, but no. Now we're going too far. And then it was, we'll agree to do the graffiti. And then as you're driving out there, hey, guess what? We're going to do this. Oh, and by the way, you're under arrest. That's how that went down. That's why everybody except the guy who confessed early because he panicked got off, because, oh my gosh, we got caught here with our shenanigans. We better sweep this one under the rug. Don't say anything if we just quit right here. You know, it's this is gone too far, gone way too far, and we're letting it happen. I mean, sleeping in the bed, conservative side can sleep in the bed they made. Started with the Patriot Act, or not
Yeah.
started, but it was really steroided up with
Yes.
the Patriot
Yes.
Act, you know. So it just keeps getting worse unless it gets better. And yeah, you talked about hate that Trump could be the nominee. He's going to be. He's going to be. DeSantis is sliding for some reason. He's confident, but I say for some reason. I think it's because he's pushing these agendas that aren't popular right now because he has the power after the election. But
I'm not sure because national polls don't matter in a primary, especially the
mhm.
Republican primary, because it's winner take all.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see, but I still think he's going to be. Did you watch his town hall?
Trump's
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I got me on this train of thought and why I was going to bring it up of why Cleopatra matters. How many times did that so-called moderator say that's not true? That's not true. That's a lie. That's a lie. Why? How?
Yeah.
What's your
Give me your
proof?
sources.
Give
Yeah.
me your source. Give me your sources. Give me your proof. No, no, they're just going to say it over and over, so it must be the way it is.
Well, and so I kind of understand a little bit better after watching that why so many people like this guy or are enamored by him because it's you love baseball, right?
Hmm.
You love baseball. It's like watching Aaron Judge at bat. He's either striking out or he's hitting one out of the park, but you watch every time. Yeah, that sums it all up. You know, she baited him early
Hmm.
on the election stuff, and he kept falling into the trap. But then when it got to some of the other things like Ukraine, he was hitting him out of the park.
Hmm.
Like, oh, so you're backing Putin, or you want Putin to win? I want people to stop dying.
Hmm.
And she was just like, yeah,
I don't know how to answer that. That's yes, reject the premise and you break the brain of the pre-programmed NPC. It doesn't know what to say.
yeah. So
Uh,
it I'm curious how this is going to play out because I'm actually more curious about the Democrat primary because Kennedy is doing so well,
mhm.
and you look at on the Republican side, DeSantis is the wild card, but Vivek is getting a lot of backing from the donors because he's an inside guy. He's in the industry, you know.
Mhm.
So he's getting a lot of backing from the donors, and if he can pull at least a decent percentage, I would love to see something like Kennedy win his primary and then pull in someone like Vivek, who's kind of an independent Republican, as a vice presidential candidate. That would be, I mean, I want to see something new. I want to see something outside of the normal duopoly. I want to see, and from what I've seen with Kennedy's interviews, he's the guy to do it because he
Yes.
doesn't give a fuck right now.
Well, he he has a shot because of the opposite reason I just said about DeSantis. And this is where you saw, remember Obama was the dark horse. Oh, I'm going to get canceled for that. He was the underdog going into 2008. It was supposed to be Hillary's time, and he came from behind because it's not winner take all in in the Democratic primary. I don't remember how much of the super delegate thing they still have too, so there's an anointment that happens. So it's easier for someone like uh RFK to stick around so
Well,
long as he has a decent showing.
there we go.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so now we've covered our ass.
So long as he has a decent showing in those first few primaries, he can stick around, which means he can gain momentum, which means he can get more eyeballs on him and what he's trying to say.
And he's so when Trump derailed during his town hall was when she got him on the subjects that were not popular, like the election uh, uh, squad, the election squad debate, right? Whereas the thing that the media keeps trying to push on Kennedy is his vaccine stance because he's kind of he is kind of true to the statement of an anti-vaxxer. But when he's pressed about it, I saw him on I think it was on Unheard. When he's pressed about it, he says, "No, this actually doesn't matter. My personal beliefs on this one thing don't matter because my solution to it is to take pharmaceutical companies and the funding out of the process. So anything that's actually good will still be available because it's just not going to be tainted by the money involved. So things like the polio vaccine and measles and mumps and everything that was around before the funding from the pharmaceutical companies to the FDA was put in place, those things will probably still be there because they have stood the test of the rigor of the scientific rigor. They've gone through the process. We talked about the 80 years for the polio vaccine to finally be the final form that it is now. That's completely different than what's going on with things like Vioxx and I meant to have this ready because I thought we would get here, but I was going to adjust the death numbers in the year Vioxx got basically taken off the market to you know how we have heart disease, this many deaths, and da 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 da. I was going to put a line in there for Vioxx because it's more. It would be like number 4 on the list that year.
Yikes.
So yeah,
That's a lot.
that's a lot, and it would actually have taken them away from the heart disease number because that's how you died from Vioxx. So cancer would have actually been the number 1 that year. So if you correct the tables for pharmaceutical shenanigans, guess how many other drugs probably fit that bill too? Because if you have a complication or a side effect from any drug that has any kind of heart-related side effect, you're coded in as heart failure. You're not coded in as died from prescription drug. And that's what he's trying to change.
Mm-hmm.
So his personal views on vaccines don't even matter. And he's actually answering the question that way. He's not getting baited into it. So if he was a better orator, this would be a slam dunk. But
Yes.
just because he's kind of hard to listen to, imagine listening to a whole State of the Union address with that guy. It's really hard to listen to, and I hate that being something that's a determining factor. But I know it's at least points on his polls. It's at least some points.
Yeah. Well, the one last thing I wanted to point out, one of the reasons I wanted to play that Chappelle clip is because I'm getting really annoyed with some of the Trump fanatics. Like I can't remember there's a guy on Tim Pool that's like this, that is really pro-Trump, anti-DeSantis. I don't remember who it is that I've
One
heard
of his
on there.
regulars, or
I think so. Yeah,
is it the guy that does the cartoons?
I think so.
Tall, skinny, dark hair, beard.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the criticisms of DeSantis has been that he's playing this game because once you're an official candidate, you can have no communications with any super PAC, with any independent super PAC. You cannot communicate with them at all, let alone, coordinate. You just can't communicate with them. Well, hold on a second. One of the things you loved about Trump and tout to this day is what Chappelle just said, that he don't hate the game, hate the player. He at least admits there's a game, and that the game is rigged. That's the incumbents have rigged the election game to benefit and favor them. DeSantis doesn't have a choice but to play this game, and you praise your guy when he does it. So let's have a little intellectual honesty here. Yeah, DeSantis is probably going to run and is probably going to announce sooner rather than later. No, he's not going to do it now because of the stupid fundraising rules and coordination rules and the various electioneering rules. He would be stupid to do that in the same way that Trump would be stupid to pay taxes that he can get out of.
Yep. In fact, one of Trump's good friends, Rich Dad Poor Dad author, he wrote a book, How to Not Pay Taxes. That is the book. And he's like, yeah, I mean, touting this, and the guy's freaking crazy, but he was touting the same line. It's like, yeah, you would be dumb to do this, but it's not like you're not spending money or you're not being productive. You're still being productive with your money. You're just doing it in a way that causes you to pay less taxes.
Well, that's all I had for today.
Yeah,
do you have any other
that sounds like a
rantings?
No, sounds like a good place to stop. We're about almost an hour and a half. So That'll be
Yeah.
just right.
Well, that
So
was more ranting than I thought I would do because I really didn't want to talk about this crap. Well, right before we started recording, I was thinking, can we just skip to New Spring and do that today?
no, we'll do New Spring on, I guess, switching to Fridays now.
Yeah.
Okay, and we got a fun little thing we were talking about. We made do a little segment on it.
Yes. Yes.
Just the tease. It was if Wheel of Time characters were current MMA fighters, or not current, but the MMA fighters. So that put me down it was a fun time using creative energy instead of just
Yes.
overthinking everything. So I've got my list, and I'm assuming you'll have a different list to some degree. But yeah, we'll spend a little time on that in spoilers.
All right. We'll see y'all then.